now. Keep your texts and your comments coming in. As I say, inundated with texts and comments. We will try to get as many through in on the programme. Catherine Fitzgerald texted last night regarding the Facebook post about the soldiers. As the mother of one of those soldiers, it's absolutely disgusting treatment of any human being. They also have a duty. There's wives and children's. The tour should be completed. They should be applauded for what they are doing, and they should be getting a date straight away to come home. Other people texting in about different matters regarding the communion dresses. I had to say I thought that woman was spending too much money on the communion dress, says this texter. Another one saying, I bought a communion dress 2 years ago, most expensive thing in the shop, but I can tell you €600 is very, very much. €400 would be the most. I do agree about the bouncy castle thing. She should be getting her deposit back. Unfortunately, everyone's health is more important, and being a health worker, people should know that. So we're going to stay with health matters for a minute. I think we've Dr. Jeff Plant on the line. Good morning, Dr. Plant.
Good morning, Damien. How are you? And good morning to your listeners. OK,
good to talk to you. We are good and hope you're keeping well. I know you're on a mobile phone, so the quality may not be brilliant, but we shall give it a go.
OK.
There are some matters coming up this morning regarding how GPs, and I heard the head of the GPs Association on radio this morning as well, regarding the latest in testing and the ability of getting tests back quickly. Can we just deal with this first? If somebody is tested for COVID, how quickly now should they be getting the results back?
We have been relatively lucky here in the last 3 weeks, I'd say, Damien. The results aren't too bad at the beginning of this. Your listeners may recall it was all a bit of a mess when it came in first. Everyone could get tested and get tested quickly. Get tested for any sort of reason, but it was taking, in fact, we were getting results back 6 weeks later, which was a bit of a, completely useless. I would say in general, there's been times I've seen results back within 24 hours, which is incredible. And then most commonly, I'd say maybe 2 or 3 days, we're getting them back here at the moment. Now, there are individual cases where I've heard of about a week, and there are individual cases where it's quicker. So I'd say an average 3 days would be where we're getting them. But I do understand around the country where there's more of a higher activity with COVID, there is waits of up to a week, 10 days, which is very, and that's what we don't want. It makes the test very difficult to interpret, and it also kind of makes, the whole reason for doing it goes out the window.
Yes, we'll talk about obesity in a minute and a stigma developing. I want to ask you a question from a texter. Could you please ask Dr. Plant, is it safe to go to the dentist at this time? I need a filling.
Now, one thing I can't comment on is the dentist. I am aware that most of them have been closed since this started. I am unsure of what has reopened and what has not reopened. So I would advise the listener to contact their dentist. I understand a lot of them will be rung back anyway, but I'm not sure what the opening is or whether some of them have reopened. My understanding maybe about 10 days ago was that they were definitely, most of them were still shut. So,
yes. We'll get on to them, yeah.
A good bit of that stuff.
Yeah. I presume from a medical perspective, that's why the text came in. In terms of obesity, medical experts are, I suppose, expressing concerns that a possible stigma is developing, Jeff, that obese people are spreading coronavirus and that such patients could be discriminated against when normal health screening returns. This is ridiculous, isn't it?
This is the first I've heard of that. Why obese people who are obese would be more of a spreaders than anyone else, I think is not true. Now, where there is a bit of truth, so I'm going to knock that on the head actually there and say I don't think that anyone with obesity is more at risk of spreading coronavirus than anyone else is right now. Anyone else, okay, including your 5-year-old child, including your 90-year-old person. I don't think that's true at all. But unfortunately, there is a link with obesity and poorer outcomes in the people who get severe COVID. Most of your listeners are probably aware at this stage that 80% of people who get coronavirus will be fine, and they might be sick with a flu-like illness for a week or so, and they recover fine. So what is uncertain from a medical point of view is why a certain small percentage become very unwell, that 2 or 3% who need kind of ICU or high dependency in hospital. And there are certain cohorts of people who are more at risk of getting that, the elderly, which we all know about at this stage, diabetics and people who are, some other people who have got multiple medical issues. But obesity is definitely in that category. And I know some of the stats from London I read last week where if you had obesity, diabetes, and particularly if you were African descent or Asian descent, that your outcomes were considerably worse than others. So I think that might be where it's coming from a bit, Damien. I do not think, though, I just want to be clear that I do not think that obese people are spreading this more than anyone else. That is just not true. Yeah,
it comes from the Irish Society for Clinical Nutrition and Metabolism. They're warning about this possible stigma matter, and as you say, there's no medical evidence whatsoever. Yeah,
from my point of view, I'd like to throw that stigma down the river now. That's just not true. But just to be aware that unfortunately, now we talk about fat shaming and people with obesity being fat shamed a lot, and people being proud of their bodies, and that's a great conversation to have. There is a but to that, I always say, is when we tell people that they are obese or overweight, we're doing it from a health point of view to try and assist them in having a healthier life. So unfortunately, whether we like it or not, being obese increases your risk significantly of having diabetes, of having high cholesterol, blood pressure, heart disease, stroke, fertility problems, gallstones, gout, kidney problems, asthma. There's many things that are linked with having obesity. So when we do it, and some people, we bring it up with people regular as they come into the surgery, and some people, most people take it very well and understand that it's an issue and they're trying to address it. Some people get offended. So it's, from a medical point of view, we're definitely not trying to stigma people or offend them. We're just trying to help them lead a healthier life.
Yeah, and there are 1 million people clinically obese in Ireland, so it is a big issue. Can I ask you another specific question, Jeff, if you don't mind, finally? Someone who's tested positive for COVID, says this person, should the whole family isolate, and for how long? For example, apparently contact tracing called the family. They don't have symptoms, so they weren't told to isolate. That's a good question.
Okay, now I would refer that family to the HTSC website. I know you've heard me mention it a lot. That will be covered very exactly in that website. Off the top of my head, they don't need to fully isolate, but they need to have restricted movements. Now, we all are having very restricted movements still at the moment, but there's a little. So if you look up the word restricted movements, I'm pretty sure the family will fall into that category of restricted movement. So it's not full isolation, but it's restricted movement. There is a subtle difference.
Okay. Jeff, thank you very much for joining us this morning.
No problem, Damien.
Good to talk to you.
Bye-bye.
Take care. Jeff Plant there with some of your medical questions. Jeff will come back on again next week and to talk to us. A lot of people texting in about Mairead this morning and wishing her best and saying it is disgraceful that they don't have an answer back from the government. The department hopefully will get back later today to us, and we'll follow that up tomorrow. And there's been quite a few people as well texting in about coming on as well to talk about it, their loved ones, so we'll see if that comes on. Some people referring to the matter we did about Dunhill last week and the shop closing last week. It's a pity people that are lucky enough to have a local shop and the locality have the choice to use it. They should use their local shops, says John in Lismore. Good morning, Damien. Why are other people worried about what someone else is spending on their children's communion or confirmation? It's her money and they can spend it as they want. Other people texting that it is too much money to spend €400 or €600 on a dress. People are going stone mad. I bought my granddaughter's dress in Debenhams, half price, €70. It was fab. Says that texter. Others saying about holidays, we booked a Budget Travel USA as a holiday package. They say our holiday was booked as a package holiday, but flights were with Air Canada, who will only issue a credit voucher to Budget Travel, who in turn will only give us a travel voucher. We're now in week 6 waiting on anything from Budget Travel USA. Very difficult situation there. Another person about weddings. This is another thing we're going to be covering later in the week. A wedding as I was supposed to attend in Spain was cancelled. I had booked with Harvey Travel and all deposits were returned. It's a brilliant service from Sean, says that texter. Another person, I'm none the wiser regarding all of this. I've 3 Aer Lingus flights booked for the next 6 months. Do I get my money back? Regarding the communion dresses, I totally agree with Aisling. I shop in Dungarvan and other places for my little girl's dresses. Yes, it's a lot of money, but that is what the shops charge. Hopefully there will be a good outcome for everyone. It's extremely hard for families of troops serving overseas, and the troops as well, for them as well. I've served on 11 separate occasions, says this texter, and we had a person who phoned in as well to 051 846 123. Paul, he says he's a former soldier. He served at the United Nations. I feel very, very sorry for the lads over there. But my wife was in Aldi the other day and saw some French or Spanish students together, and it appeared that they just arrived here. Our students arriving here for the summer. We put a call out about that, Paul, the other day. I mentioned it on the programme to ask our students coming over to Waterford or to Ireland to spend time in the summer. Has anybody any idea on that? If they do, please text us in. And another texter asking, is there a thing called Mobile Barber Waterford developing? Somebody said there's something on Facebook about a mobile barber in Waterford. Surely this can't be happening at present. And here is a very specific question regarding the lockdown and how things are changing. Good morning. Myself and my dad own a boat. My dad is 84 years old and he loves our little days out on the boat fishing. I'm his carer, so I've been around him throughout this lockdown and cocooning. He keeps asking me, can we go out on the boat? It would be just the two of us. Social distancing is not an issue on the water. I'd love to take him out for a few hours and put a bit of colour in his cheeks. I just don't know if it's allowed. That's one of the matters we're going to be dealing with this week regarding the change of circumstances in terms of cocooning, which is supposed to be developing next Monday as well. So we'll come back to you on that. But that's a very difficult situation. Keep your texts and comments coming in. We want to know, what is your favourite brown bread recipe? Now, keep your texts and your comments coming in. Many texts about the issues we've been covering this morning. Support for the Irish soldiers abroad. Also a lot of texts coming in about the communion dresses and confirmation dresses and communions in particular. Text in from a listener down in West Waterford. Why are the church gates in Grange and Ardmore locked? Are all church gates locked? This can be very upsetting for people visiting family graves. People have to climb over the wall to get in. It can be very dangerous in Grange, says this person. It's locked all year round. Just wondering, can we get in and what's happening there? Well, we'll get in touch with the diocese to see what the situation is. We had the bishop on the other day talking about essential services, and with that somebody texted in, I know some priests are essential services in terms of visiting the sick, says this texter, but surely going around exposing the Blessed Sacrament is not an essential service, says this texter. Now, brown bread. Good morning, Mr. Quinn.
How are you, Damien?
I'm very good, thank you. Thanks for joining us this morning.
No problem at all. Yeah, brown bread. It's everyone. Well, I'm glad to see people are starting to make soda bread. It's a traditional Irish bread.
Yeah, we'll talk about the recipes now in a minute, but the reason we've brought this up this morning is obviously a lot of people in lockdown are seeing armies of people going out making bread, going home making bread, but now the Germans, the world masters of sourdough and other breads, a different variety, so it seems they're getting exciting about Irish soda bread.
Yes, yeah, and you can see why. I mean, a good soda bread, it's easy to make. You can do it in a couple of minutes. It's just and it bakes. Just put it in the oven and it works. There's no waiting for it to prove and stretching out the dough and getting the proper flour. I mean, flour is very important to soda bread, but it's very doable. That's the thing. You can do it and it's done in minutes.
We'll talk about the difference and what you can put into it. Derek Scally is writing from Berlin in the Irish Times that the main recipe that's taken off in Germany is not just any old soda bread recipe, writes Nicole Quaint, but a reproduction of a handwritten recipe from a West Cork goat farmer, handwritten and handed down through the generations. So What's your favourite soda bread recipe? Just do you just keep it real simple?
I do, but I tend to put in. I put pumpkin seeds, sunflower seeds, sesame seeds, and the key to it is flour. Now, there's lots and lots of flours out there, but the ones for me to look out for the Dunany flour, Donany, and it's a whole grain extra coarse. So you get those little, kibbles of wheat in it, and then the other flour is Macroon's stone ground flour, and they have their own mill and they stone their flour, they stone ground it, and you get all those lovely bits, and it's really good for you because it just cleans out your digestive system. And I put a little bit of, the recipe I use is 280 grams of coarse wholemeal flour, either or of those two that I just mentioned. I put 85 to 90 grams of strong white flour, a teaspoon of baking soda, half a teaspoon of salt, teaspoon of brown sugar, 1 egg, 300 mils of buttermilk. Mix it all up together. Put in your seeds, a handful of pumpkin, or if whatever you have, and even if you don't have seeds, just bake it as it is anyway. And put it into a hot oven. That's the other key thing, because you want the oven to be about 200 degrees. And the minute it gets in, then the reaction between the baking powder and the acidity of the buttermilk, that's what gives it a little rise. And you feel healthy eating it. That's the key to it.
Mm. Why are you, you're a well-known chef and culinary lecturer at WIT, why are you so adamant that the actual flour that you use can be so important?
It's like, I suppose it's like anything. If the flour is overworked and it's not coarse and it's not, it's too refined, the bread, it's not the same bread. This bread is quite, you need that coarseness in it and it does a fantastic job on your insides. It's just, as I said, your digestive system will thank you for it. And also the 2 mills that I mentioned, they're Irish. Most of our flour comes in from England and the States, but these are Irish mills. And the Dunany flour is grown. The flour is grown in Ireland, and it's a more authentic flour to use. It's what would have been used 100 years ago.
And where are you getting your flour from? Says this texter, because it's like gold dust in certain shops.
Yes, it is. I get it in Arkeen, and I go up there every week to get it. Now, like yeast, I spent 5 weeks waiting to get yeast, and I finally got a load of it last Friday. But
contraband, huh? Where did you have to go and meet somebody in a car park, was it, and get it out of the boot?
Exactly, yeah. You'd be probably, but the flour, I can't emphasize enough how important to get good flour. And even if you can't, just try and make it anyway, because it's one of those breads that you just put everything together and you kind of, when you have the liquid in it, it's the consistency of kind of wet cement. That's what you're looking for, kind of like a slop, not runny, but a sloppy kind of dough that you're making. And you just put it into either a bread tin or shape it in a the traditional way was shape it in a round and then cut a square across, a deep square, and then bang it in the oven. But it is a lovely thing to make, and I'm not surprised the Germans are finally copying onto it.
And how long do you bake it for?
Under an hour, just about 3/4 of an hour, about 3/4 of an hour, 50 minutes, depending on the oven. But and take it out, leave it cool down, and then enjoy it. But it's and it goes with everything. You can have it for, we can put salmon, you can put whatever on it, eggs, you can do whatever. It's one of those vehicles for using all sorts of stuff.
Somebody's texted in to say Aldi have giant bags of flour in at the moment. They must be anticipating that people are going to be doing a lot of baking. What about those that say, Michael, that by putting seeds and stuff like that into a traditional bread is not the right way to do it at all? Purists, I suppose. But I think recipes evolve, and this is how they evolve.
or a vase. And I think it's like the seed thing again. It's just trying to be a bit healthier, a bit conscious of what you're eating in that. And I think I like to experiment, but that kind of stuff is really good in it. And if you want to just do it like your grandmother did or your great grandmother did, just do it that way. That's fine.
A lot of people are texting in about this already, Michael. It's got people animated. Joe has texted her a Cafe Macroom brown bread recipe. They're saying Everett's makes some lovely brown bread, and there are some.
They do.
They really do some beautiful breads out there. So
Peter's making beautiful baguettes and brown bread down there.
Yeah,
it's really good. But and like I was speaking to a doctor this morning. He was saying that his daughter is at home and 9 years of age, and she's doing loads of baking, and she's experimenting with bits and pieces, and it's a lovely way, and kids learn so much. They're weighing out stuff, the process, the cleaning, the whole thing. It's a great thing to do, and people have the time to do it now. And then you have the benefit of after you can sit down and enjoy it.
You have my lips watering now, Michael. Thanks very much.
No problem, Damien. Take care of yourself.
Good to talk to you. Thanks very much. Bye. Michael Quinn. See you, Michael. Bye-bye. Michael Quinn there, well-known Waterford chef and culinary lecturer. What do you think? Text us in. We're going to be following this up tomorrow, hopefully talking to people down in West Waterford, a certain lovely B&B in the Nire Valley, about their famous brown bread as well, soda bread. People are texting in, no, you shouldn't put anything into it. Keep it the way it was, the way God made it. Damien, we paid the fee for having the Leaving Cert 2 weeks ago, €116. Do we know if that will be returned? My understanding is that it will. I'm not sure when, but that's my understanding. Good morning. I got my car insurance renewal. It's gone up by €100. We were led to believe the car insurance would reflect the time that we're having and less motoring we're doing. It should be going down rather than up, says that texter. 083 333 975. Now, Dr. Ida Milne is going to talk to us in a second. Firstly, good morning from Germany. Can you please put up the recipe for brown bread again? I missed it. I live in Germany and I would like to try it. Best wishes from Breda O'Neill. Hello, Breda, and all our listeners in Germany. I know there's quite a few in different parts of Germany. Good morning, Jackie in Kilrossenty, also asking for the recipe, and Sylvia's texted in. We'll see if we can get that recipe up. Damien, I think fishing is one of the restrictions lifted. RT did a report last week on a man out in a boat fishing up the country, bank fishing allowed 2 at a time, and must social distance from 5 kilometres from home. Good morning. Kilbarry SuperValue at the bakery department are very kind and give you a portion of yeast. I got one last week for €1. We will do that. Dr. Milne, good morning.
Good morning, David. Lovely to be on again.
Lovely to talk to you again. Are you a brown bread connoisseur? We have people debating the merits of brown bread, whether we should keep it traditional or whether we should put stuff into it. Do you bake at home? You do?
I am the world's worst baker. Trying to make sourdough for the last 3 weeks, like everybody else in the world, and it will never rise. So my bread can be used to make bricks. Brilliant.
Thank you so much for joining us, Dr. Milne. You are, as we know, historian of disease and history lecturer at Carlow College. You wrote the seminal book, one of the books about the Spanish flu, and we don't want to regurgitate the entire Spanish flu episode because we've heard it before, as they say, but just to remind people about the second wave, please, because this is the reason we want to talk to you about. The second wave of the Spanish flu as it developed, it was actually more deadly than the first, was it?
Yes, it was indeed. It was one of 3 waves we experienced here in Ireland of the Spanish flu. The first wave was very mild. It was in May, June, July 1918. It did kill, but not in the huge numbers that the October wave struck. It came with some vengeance, hitting very hard, particularly here in the southeast. Leinster, most of Leinster was really badly affected, but particularly, I think, the port towns like New Ross, Waterford, Wexford itself, and up along the coast, as far as Belfast again in the second wave.
Okay.
It was much more severe. It really silenced more or less the whole of Leinster in the southeast when it happened. Kilkenny in particular had really bad experience with it. it stopped people moving, even though there was no quarantine or no isolation, no formal isolation. It really stilled business because either the staff were going ill or people were too sick to go out and about, or else they were afraid to catch it. So the shops went quite quiet and things like that. A lot of public buildings closed, matches, concerts, etc. were cancelled, and the hospitals were overflowing and turning over most of the space they had to treating flu patients. And I've even heard some stories of things like people being born in, when their mothers would go into labour, they'd be born in the mental asylum rather than in the main hospital. I suppose maybe they were trying to keep the mothers away from infection in the main hospitals, but I'm not sure about that. These are just stories people give me when I give history talks.
Yeah, like it's 100 years ago, and people might have this idea that it was kind of prehistoric times, but there were very specific measures made and taken by the governments, and in particular in Ireland, to quarantine people. As you say, there were people going around with masks, cloth masks, and there were major efforts made to stop the spread of the Spanish flu. So the efforts were made, and then people went back too quickly to normal lives. Was that what happened?
Yes. I think once it went away, there was no central plan from government, but really under the various disease control acts, most of the control of infection was up, or sanitation was up to the local authorities. So the local authorities and local doctors and a lot of journalists would advise people to stay home and to stay away from other people to avoid infection. So that would have been not, as I say, a central authority, but locally. And a lot of journalists would go out and seek advice from the more prominent doctors, like Charles Cameron, who was the Dublin Corporation Medical Officer of Health, 88 at the time, still working. And his advice was really clear and practical, and he said too many people are out and about just now. They should be at home and keeping away to avoid contagion. That's the best way to prevent catching the spread disease, as they called it.
So, from your experience of the Spanish flu and the history of it, what would you think about what's happening at the minute? Obviously, people want to get out and about in a controlled way, and they want to return to some kind of degree of normality. Would you be worried that we may not learn from history, or what's your thoughts on the current situation?
Well, there are two different diseases. Spanish flu, when it was allowed to travel around the country without control, because those controls were really quite informal, infected about 800,000 people on the island. If we had that kind of level of contagion, if we hadn't had the shutdown that we've had, we might have seen something much more close to that. And that Spanish flu also killed 23,000 people, including the excess deaths from associated pneumonias. So luckily, even though the number of deaths is quite horrible, and we haven't seen anything like that level. And what we're now seeing, I suppose, is that the hospitals didn't overflow like they did in 1918, and that this was the worry in the beginning, and why the government and the HSE, etc., set up so many kind of ancillary hospital facilities, because they were aware that's what the picture could be. But it hasn't happened, thanks to good behaviour by us as citizens, as well as good planning and advice from government. The fear, of course, is if we are let out and that it does start to spread fast again, that could still be the picture. But I think we're all well aware now that how to watch that and to see. And we just hope it doesn't come to that level when the hospitals do get overwhelmed. But the government will be watching it very carefully.
Yes, they will.
The big worry, of course, is that there isn't immunity granted. Immunity granted at the wrong term, but that one might be able to catch it again. We don't know how long. We don't have the statistical data yet to know if people will be immune to it once they've had a dose of it before.
Okay.
So, whereas we would know with flu now that there would be some degree of immunity with that. Spanish flu actually did circulate for those 3 waves, and by then more or less everybody had got it around the world. By 1920 or so, there was a 4th wave in some places. And then it just became endemic. It was part of the regular seasonal flu until about 1958, when the next pandemic, a different strain came, and that dominated. So we don't know yet, and I'm not a scientist, so I don't know enough to know whether that would be the case with this as well. But we hope that it will be possible, of course, to get a vaccine, or that there will be some degree of immunity, so that we can return to a more normal life.
Dr. Mill, Ida, thank you so much for joining us this morning.
Thank you for having me on. Can I just say a quick hello to my students who are doing exams this week in Carlow College?
You will certainly, and mind yourself. Take care. Thank you.
You too. Thank you.
Thanks
Bye-bye.
very much, Dr. Ida Milner, historian of disease and history lecturer at Carlow College. I suppose the second wave of the Spanish flu was more deadly than the first. Any lessons we can learn from it? We have to learn lessons from that. Happy birthday to Michael Toner, who's 59 today, from Nuala, and the children and the grandchildren. Another text in regarding birthday wishes. Can you please wish Mary Ryan a very happy birthday today? Love from John. We have texts in regarding brown bread recipes. The recipe I use for brown bread has been passed down from my mother and from her mother before her. It's just wholemeal flour, white flour, salt, bread soda, buttermilk. My grandmother cooked it every day over the fire, and she called it a cake. No sugar, treacle or seeds. Thank you. That's from Caroline in the county. Now, in a minute, I'm going to be talking to Dr. Helen Murphy about new supports for businesses in Waterford. So keep your texts and comments coming in. Pat texted in, the second wave of Spanish flu happened amid mass movement of troops and civilians at the end of World War I and occurred before Fleming had discovered penicillin. So we shouldn't be hysterical about this in any way, says Pat. Good point, Pat. Well made. Good morning. I rang the doctor this morning because I don't feel well. I'm on my way to Clonmel now for the test. Damien, when you're doing your requests, we had a special mention, Rita Power, to say a special thank you to Deirdre Kelly as being an angel to her during lockdown. Deirdre has brought her flowers every week, but puts plants on her mother's grave for her anytime she bakes and drops in stuff. She owes her so much, and she's a real hero. That is Rita Power saying a special thank you to Deirdre Kelly. John phoned in to say, hearing you talk about the second wave of the virus, people around certain estates at the weekend were having parties. Sometimes people in their 30s, 40s and 50s. The guards never arrive, even though they were called. So were there parties going on over the weekend? Are people breaking the lockdown rules? And Breda has texted back from Germany to say, you've made my day. Brown bread and the guitar man. Dr. Helen Murphy. Good morning, Helen.
Good morning, Damien. How are you?
I'm good, thank you. Thank you for joining us. Head of the School of Education and Lifelong Learning at WIT. Tell me, please, there's 4 free courses you're announcing as part of Enterprise Support Initiative Week. Tell me about this, please.
Sure. So I suppose, Damien, following the kind of general shutdown March 12th and the last couple of weeks, we knew that enterprises across the Southeast and individuals in enterprises across the Southeast might need additional support, and a number of us got together to think, what could we do in the short term to help support enterprises, particularly small and medium enterprises and micro enterprises in Waterford and the surrounding counties. So we thought that we would offer, we identified a number of programs, short programs, largely in the area of finance and marketing, really targeted at helping businesses migrate some of their processes online. So digital marketing and things like payroll and computerized accounts. So we put these 4 short programs together. The 2 other programs are another finance short program for companies, organisations working in the community and voluntary sector who are suffering hugely at the moment, I think, as we all know. And also we thought that something around managing stress for individuals who may be still working, some people may be at home, etc. So we launched it there about 10 days ago, and with 80 free places, if you like, specifically targeting, as I said, companies and individuals in the southeast who are really impacted by COVID and business closures, etc. And we got an overwhelming positive response to it. We had, within kind of 3 days, we launched it just before the bank holiday weekend, and a soft launch, we kind of circulated to the various different networks like Waterford Chambers, the Southeast Regional Skills Forum and so on. But we had it on our website, and within 72 hours we had over 350 applications. So
wow.
We were overwhelmed. Yeah, we were really overwhelmed with the response. So what we've done since then is we've doubled the capacity on 2 of the programs where we can. So we're going to be starting all of these programs next week, and we have about 140, 150 individuals who will be starting with us over the coming weeks on the 4 programs that I mentioned.
And then you have people on a waiting list. Would that be right?
We do, of course. So, initially we had planned actually on just offering 80 places, so 20 on each programme. We pretty much doubled that when we saw the demand, and that's what we're rolling out for the next couple of weeks. That'll bring us into kind of the end of July. And we will have a range of programmes which continue to be funded. These are funded programmes under Springboard, which is a national kind of funded initiative for adult learners who want to come back to college to reskill, etc. So that'll kick off in September. So we know we may still have, and we'll look at the possibility of rolling out these shorter programmes from September again, but we're going to be pretty busy over the next kind of 8 weeks or so.
Do you think colleges like WIT will have a really important part to play in getting people back to work and retraining people, like the initiatives you're doing?
Yeah. Look, there's absolutely no doubt about it. We've seen the rates of unemployment rocket in the last couple of weeks, and we're all expecting the next kind of 12 months to be very, very difficult. So we have, and I mean, Damien, we'd have a long history of kind of offering programs for people to, be it change their careers, to upskill, etc., all across Waterford and the southeast over the last number of years. And so, I would say we have a lot of experience of doing this, and we will have a critically important role in terms of making sure the right type of programs are offered, that they're very directed at the specific needs of individuals and organisations. And as I said, the next suite of programmes that will be offered to people will become September under Springboard. But I expect that we will have to augment what we're going to do over the next 12 to 18 months in terms of just what's interesting from the response that we got from this, which is a short-term initiative. It was something that we could do quite quickly, if you like, is that people seem to be looking for kind of short, very specific programs that are directly targeted at what they need right now. And I think we need to think about that and how we can incorporate that into kind of our longer programs, because we've got lots of degree programs and programs at all levels really for adults who will wish to come back. And we are expecting we're going to have a huge number of people who have been already made redundant, who are going to be unemployed, and who will be looking for opportunities and flexible opportunities to reskill and upskill.
Yeah, I think it will have you will have a massive part to play in it, and also from the college perspective to do that sort of online courses to change your work practices will be a big change as well, and to do it right, because you do want to do it right.
Yeah.
And those courses, I was looking at the details of the free online courses that you've announced. They're excellent. They look really, really good. If anybody is interested in getting in touch and trying to find out a little bit, what would you say, Helen?
Sure. So go to our website. So www.wit.ie/part-time, and go on the website, and there are a number of email addresses there that they can click through and register interest, if you like. Now, the courses at the moment are full. They're booked out for the coming weeks, but we're absolutely open to taking people who are interested in this, and we're working on what we're going to be able to continue to do come September.
Okay, thanks so much, Helen. I really appreciate you coming on.
Not at all. Thanks, Damien.
Thank you very much, Dr. Helen Murphy there. Thank you. Head of the School of Education and Lifelong Learning at WIT, WIT. So just go into the WIT website, as she said there, and go into part-time and you'll find all the details there. If you have any more questions, get in touch and ask us. 083 333 975. Any texts that come in after the programme, we'll deal with them tomorrow. And there are some people texting in about going back to work and having big issues about going back to work. Others saying, I booked a hotel break in Cork in early June, a non-refundable deal for 2 nights for nearly €300. Now it looks like the hotel will be closed. Can you find out, will we be entitled to a full refund? And what about going back to work next week? We had a text in from a West Waterford listener. Due to go back next week, but I've 2 children, one of whom has special needs. And my mother minds her, but she's in a high risk category. Not sure if I can go back to work. Not sure when I can give the children to my mammy. Very difficult situation, and that's something we'll be dealing with tomorrow. What can be done with people cycling on footpaths? I was walking into town last week and a cyclist was cycling on the footpath. I had to step aside to let him pass. I said to him he should be on the road. He told me where to go. I'm going to head off now into the sunset on this lovely Monday. Get out for a brisk walk if I can. Jeff is up next. Please keep it here on WR. Thank you so much for your texts and your comments. I want to say a special mention to my old friend Sean O'Rourke. First day he's not going to be on the air. Sean, enjoy your retirement. I know you're going to be back on the air in another format, and take care and mind yourself. Thank you everybody for listening. Thank you Julie for producing. We'll talk to you tomorrow.